Can I unpack something you were saying earlier about, like, I really love what you were just talking about with getting really clear on, like, building your library and kind of defining your sound. Like, I'd love to know both philosophically your approach for that, but also I'd really love to know about, like, some of the real nitty gritty, like, how are you organizing them? Like, how do you keep your presets? How do you keep all your kind of settings available? I know you're in live, so I know a little bit obviously about how to save stuff in there, but can you walk us through your whole process? Maybe start philosophically about, like, even how you gathered stuff in your process of choosing things, and then we can get into the
I started thinking, I got really into, in the last like 2 or 3 years, I've gotten pretty into cooking, um, more as of like a necessity because we're like a family of four now.
Mhm.
The fourth one isn't really eating solid foods yet, but looking forward, I thought, like,
I'm glad you qualified that statement,
yeah,
by
yeah.
the way. It's like, that's going to
I
be
was
some heavy therapy bills for the little boy in like 20 years otherwise.
exactly. But I
Sorry,
started thinking,
carry on. So you've been cooking and it got you
yeah, I've
thinking.
been cooking and thinking about like, we can't eat out as much, and we got to like be more conscientious with what we eat and like health, because that's a journey in itself. In your 20s, you realize when you're a teenager, you eat Del Taco for breakfast every day, but you realize that catches up to you pretty quick. So yeah, I got into that, and then a friend of mine, a music maker, Brian Funk, he makes really great packs in which I use a ton of on my track as well. He did a track podcast. He's a podcast host called Mise en Place, and using that everything in its place technique with music, and like having your space not only be like a bliss station, as Austin Kleon would say in this book, by the way, which I read this year, and I just can't say enough about how good it is. It's
amazing. I've read Share Your Work and Steal Like an Artist, but I haven't read that one yet. Yeah.
This new one, for me was definitely my favorite, but he talks about having a bliss station, which in what I see here, your studio looks very blissful to me. And when I was there, it's really nice.
Yeah. Do you want to describe that for folks who aren't maybe necessarily immediately grabbing it?
Yeah. So Austin Kleon talks about having this place that's free of anything that's stressful to you, and a place that you feel like is blissful to sit down at and work. And incidentally, his is actually in his garage in Austin, Texas, but he's created this really cool like workbench for his writing with all of his art on the walls and like all of this really interesting creative prompts, to like get him going. And so I was really focusing on the bliss station physically, and not only that, but like when I go into my computer, because we spend so much time with our computers, like how can I make my relationship with this like library of sounds also blissful? And so I started like kind of veering off of the plugins that I started with and like the sounds that you kind of collect early on, because that's what and started diving into these like independent creators or just like smaller companies that I didn't hear about much, and really thinking about like what the sounds do to me like emotionally. Because this whole project, like I'll be the first to say, I'm not like we talked about before, like I'm not technically sound with chord theory, and I won't jump on like a synth and start jamming out. Like it's hard for me to like play the guitar or play a synth, which is why the Push 2 for me is like the best thing I ever bought, because it helps me get the ideas from my head to the final track. But I'm like a very emotional songwriter, so I started reaching for all of these sounds as a chef would for like high top shelf ingredients, and trying to refine my palette there, and then that kind of helped transfer over into like my even how I write chord progressions and how I program certain sounds.
So yeah, I don't know if you got that question, but I was just asking about whether you treated that kind of curation of the sounds as like its own process. So were you just like sitting down and trying to find stuff? And then also I'm curious as well, like in terms of building your library, what did you do to actually clear out the stuff that you didn't like?
Yeah, so I have an archive folder where I'll go through my sample library every once in a while, and I'll delete stuff sometimes, but mainly I'll create an archive folder to where maybe 5 years from now I'll want to work on a project that's more like, like disco house, and I'll have those old drum samples that I loved, or like those cool inspiration starters. But I try to keep my library, sound library like pretty small for the current like situation. And it's different for me because I'm not working with tons of different artists and tons of different genres, right? I'm basically working in two genres on these two projects. And so I try to keep it like visually clean, and then I'll put anything I want like right at the top. Like I always use, 4 to 6 different libraries that I love, or like, and I started to get really creative and meticulous with my colored folders within Live as well, and changing the names of them rather than like what they are, like changing them to be like color, or like trying to figure out my tag section.
You're talking about using like the tagging system in Live, and I'm really curious as well, like if you buy like a specific instrument or a specific library, it's a dilemma I'm actually kind of trying to figure out a little bit for myself at the moment. Do you like throw out things you don't like in there, or if it's a synth, do you have a way of organizing presets? Like do you make individual kind of instrument channels in Live that you just drop in with those sounds loaded up, or do you have like a curation method within a synth that has a bunch of its own settings?
Yeah, I'll make like a group of like a synth plus a couple effects that I've created that like really were the anchor of a certain track and I really love. Like there's this one arpeggio that I created, like an effects chain on this new track that's coming out that I recently like put into a folder, and I've started to call it like my divorce chord like selects basically. But I also want to go back through all of the releases and create custom instruments and like presets for everything, because at this point, I mean, it's kind of, I enjoy it. Like every time I open a new project, I start fresh. But there's also like callbacks that I want to make sound wise. And so I'm actually, this week I was in the process of doing that. And I was thinking about just like making a free like sample like loop pack of like some of the loops that are within the songs, just because it's not that hard. And sometimes I'll take those loops and get inspired for a whole new song. I'm taking a loop within a track that's been released and then getting inspired for a whole new song. So yeah, I'm kind of in the process of doing that as well right now. I've been, getting into a lot more user presets, especially with the lo-fi hip hop stuff for Dream Tax. Like that stuff is very methodical, and like I've created some piano presets that I really love. And so that's kind of what put me down the path of doing like that for Divorce Chord as well.
Love it. I love it. So is it a bit more like as if you're making something and something sticks, then you'll kind of keep to it? Sorry, I keep like really want to make sure I fully understand your flow. So I guess you have like the broader, making sure your settings are available through tags, and then like if you create something and you like it, you're starting to build up a library of those as well.
Yeah. A library of not only loops, but like presets as well.
Right, okay. And then the presets, will you still have those like within a synth, or do you put them into like a rack or something in Live so that they're like, I'm kind of curious about where you're loading them from, if you know what I mean.
I'll put them into a rack so they stay in that user library within, and typically a sound for this project is created with like a few different assets, more than just like the synth preset or the tweak, right? So
okay, so it's like a whole kind of chain. Kind of thing. Yeah. Awesome. Yeah. That's great. Yeah, I feel like I've done a little bit of that, but could easily spend like a couple of months building those out. And I think it's such a good point you're making as well about like getting stuff from tracks that's worked. Did you I really love how, you're just saying like really having a clear vision for kind of the sound world and the feeling, and how the tones are informing the feeling, and almost like that then informs your writing as stuff. So you've kind of created this like positive feedback loop. To give your project identity. Did you have to go through any kind of mental switch? Because I think what we can do as producers, getting back to what you're saying earlier, is there's this concept like anytime we build a track, like everything has to be made from scratch, and we can never reuse the same thing or anything like that. But I mean, you never see AC/DC being like, you know what, we had that kind of the big Marshall stack Gibson SG guitar sound on the last track, so we can't do it again. Do you know what I mean? But was there a kind of a process to like unlocking that revelation, or was there like a frustration beforehand, or did it just kind of naturally evolve?
Yeah, I think the frustration occurred in all of these songs I've written in between that haven't seen the light of day, because they just didn't feel like they fit, And so
interesting.
I feel like, because I mean, I don't know how, I think I have 7 or 8 singles out with for Divorce Court, but I've probably written close to finishing, like 25 songs or so. And there's
Right.
like 100 to 200 more ideas, right? But these songs are like I've played a lot of those songs live even,
Hmm.
and they've just never felt like they matched. And so in order to maximize my like efficiency, I think at this point I want to do the like preset and the more organized process, but I never want to get to a point where it's not creative and where I just open up a template and have the same drums, the same bass synth, and the same synth and start writing. Like I
Hmm.
never want it to be templatized. And so it's trying to find that balance of organization without
Hmm.
taking away from like the discovery feeling of a new sound or a new feeling.
Hey, we hope you enjoyed that video. A couple of more links here for some talks we think you'll like. Please don't forget to subscribe to the channel, and otherwise head over to completeproducer.net so that you can connect with other music making geniuses from all over the world. We'll see you there.